In Chapter 3, we're going to look at the internal structure of cells and touch briefly on the function of the structures. The cell theory probably sounds like common sense, since you've known about cells from early childhood. Imagine what it was like in the late 1600s, when microscopes were first refined sufficiently to clearly see cells. Microscopes greatly changed the study of biology. It wasn't until this time that we realized that all living things are composed of cells. Scientists discovered that the cell is the smallest, the simplest entity that possesses all the characteristics of life, such as growth, reproduction, metabolism, etc. The third component of the cell theory is that new cells are produced by other living cells. As you saw in lab, many cells contain distinct structures in the cytoplasm. These organelles, which means small organs, are primarily found in eukaryotic cells. They're usually surrounded by a membrane that separates them from the remainder of the cell. Nuclei, chloroplasts, and mitochondria are examples of organelles. In lab, we used methylene blue to stain your cheek cells and the onion cells. The stain enabled us to easily see the nucleus in each cell. Most of the genetic information, the DNA, is found in the nucleus. The DNA is associated with protein to form structures called chromosomes. You could not see chromosomes in your cheek cells because they were in an extremely thin, unwound form called chromatin. I didn't point it out during lab, but if you looked closely, you may have noticed darker, round structures within the nuclei. These are nucleoli, and they are the site of ribosomal RNA synthesis. We'll talk more about RNA later in the semester. The nucleus is clearly, sharply delineated from the surrounding cytoplasm. This outer boundary is formed by the nuclear envelope, a membrane that surrounds the nucleus. Remember that prokaryotic means before nuclei. It is thought that these cells are more similar to the very first cells. Members of the domains Archaea and bacteria have prokaryotic cells. They do not contain nuclei or other membrane-surrounded organelles. All members of the domain Eukarya do have true nuclei in their cells. In addition to nuclei, eukaryotic cells also contain a variety of membrane-surrounded organelles. This picture represents a typical animal cell. Notice the large round nucleus near the center of the cell. Within the nucleus, colored blue in this picture, is the nucleolus. Surrounding the cell is the plasma membrane. All cells are surrounded by plasma membranes. Like other membranes, it's a selective barrier, allowing some things to pass through easily while preventing others from entering or leaving the cell. All cell membranes are composed primarily of two rows, in other words, a bilayer of phospholipids. This drawing depicts the basic structure of cell membranes. Remember, the red spheres of the phospholipids represent the hydrophilic phosphate-containing end of the molecule, while the legs represent the hydrophobic lipid. Due to their interactions with each other and with water in and surrounding the cell, the phospholipids maintain this orientation without being tightly bonded to each other. Hopefully you saw darkly stained cell walls around the onion cells in lab. Cell walls are found surrounding the cells of plants, most fungi, bacteria, and the plant-like protistans. Usually the plasma membrane is tightly pressed against the cell wall. Cell walls provide structural support to cells. In some, like wood and trees, these walls collectively give great strength to the tissues. Cellulose is abundant in plant cell walls, while other substances make up the cell walls of the other organisms. This drawing represents a typical plant cell. Notice the large nucleus similar to that present in animal cells. Colored yellowish green here, see how the cell wall completely surrounds the cell. Pieces of adjoining cell wall are also included in the drawing. Front and center of the drawing, you can see where the cell wall was peeled back to reveal the plasma membrane. In the broadest sense, the term cytoplasm refers to everything located between the plasma membrane and the nuclear envelope. Using that definition, it would include the liquid and organelles. I tend to use a more restricted definition, using cytoplasm to mean only the liquid surrounding the organelles. Let's take a break, In the second screencast for Chapter 3, I'll cover the remaining organelles.